The biting wind whipped through the narrow streets of Amsterdam, carrying with it the scent of wet cobblestones and an undercurrent of fear. It was late autumn of 1942, and the Nazi occupation had tightened its grip on the Netherlands, strangling the vibrancy that once defined the city. Curfews were strictly enforced, food rations dwindled, and the constant presence of German patrols cast a long, oppressive shadow over daily life. For Elara Visser, a young woman of 24, each day was a tightrope walk between hope and despair. She lived in a small, modest house near the canals, its gabled roof a familiar sight against the grey skies. Her parents, staunch members of the Dutch resistance in their own quiet ways, had instilled in her a deep sense of justice and a quiet defiance. One frigid evening, as the city prepared for another night under occupation, a frantic knock echoed through Elara's home. Her heart pounded against her ribs as she peered through the peephole. Outside stood Jan, a trusted contact from the resistance, his face grim, a sense of urgency radiating from him. "Elara, we have a problem," he whispered, pushing a barely conscious man through the door. "He's British, an airman, shot down. He needs immediate help, or he won't make it." The airman, barely more than a boy, slumped against the doorframe, his uniform tattered, a crimson stain spreading across his side. His eyes fluttered open for a moment, revealing an intense blue, before closing again in pain. Panic warred with resolve within Elara. Harboring an Allied soldier was an act punishable by death, not just for her, but for her entire family. Yet, looking at the young man's pale face, she knew there was no other choice. "Upstairs," she instructed, her voice steadier than she felt. "To the attic. No one must know." The attic, a dusty, cramped space usually reserved for forgotten keepsakes, would become his sanctuary. As she and Jan carefully helped the soldier up the creaking stairs, Elara knew her life had just irrevocably changed. The weight of the secret settled upon her, heavy and cold, but beneath it a tiny spark of defiance glowed. This was more than just saving a life. It was a silent act of rebellion against the darkness that had consumed their world. The war had entered her home, and she was ready to fight it from within. Remember to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next chapters of this incredible story. The attic was cold, the air thick with dust and the scent of old wood. Elara worked quickly, her movements precise, despite the tremor in her hands. She tore strips from an old linen sheet, her grandmother's, to bandage the soldier's wound. He groaned, a pained sound, as she cleaned the deep gash on his side. "What's your name?" she whispered, trying to keep her voice steady. He blinked, his eyes slowly opening. Thomas Sterling," he rasped, his accent distinctly English. "Royal Air Force." Elara nodded, her expression grim. "You're safe here, Thomas, but no one can know, not a soul. My parents are involved with the resistance, but this is different. It's too dangerous for them to be directly aware." She explained the strict German patrols, the omnipresent fear, the network of informants. Thomas listened, his face etched with pain and a growing understanding of his precarious situation. His initial relief at being rescued was quickly replaced by the heavy burden of Elara's risk. For the next few days, Elara became his sole caregiver. She brought him small portions of her meager rations, warm water for washing, and clean bandages. The wound, thankfully, wasn't infected, but his recovery was slow. He was weak, and the constant hunger gnawed at him. They spoke in hushed tones, mostly about his injury and the immediate necessities. Elara told him snippets of life outside, the increasingly harsh realities of occupation, and the constant fear that hung in the air. Thomas, in turn, shared brief glimpses of his life before the war. A quiet village in England, a family waiting, the sky always his ambition. The attic, once a silent space, now held their whispered conversations, their shared anxieties, and the fragile hope of survival. The creaking of the floorboards below became a constant source of tension for Elara. Every distant siren, every heavy step on the street sent a jolt of fear through her. She perfected the art of subtle movements, of hushed sounds, and of feigning normalcy. The secret of Thomas's presence was a living thing, breathing silently in her home, demanding constant vigilance. The burden was immense, but as she watched Thomas slowly regain a flicker of strength, she knew it was a burden she would continue to bear. The bond forming between them, born out of shared adversity, was becoming an unexpected anchor in a turbulent world. As Thomas slowly recovered, the days in the attic began to blur into weeks. His physical wounds were healing, but the psychological toll of confinement and separation from his world was palpable. Elara noticed his growing restlessness, the quiet despair in his eyes. One afternoon, while bringing him a small cup of weak tea, she saw him staring blankly at the dusty rafters. "You miss home, don't you?" she asked softly. Thomas nodded, a deep sigh escaping him. "More than words can say. My family, they'll be worried sick. And there's a girl back home. We were supposed to—" He trailed off, the unspoken future hanging heavy in the air. "I wish I could tell them I'm alive." A thought sparked in Elara's mind. It was risky, incredibly so, but it might offer him some comfort, a connection to the world beyond the attic walls. "Perhaps you could write," she suggested, her voice barely a whisper. "Letters. I can't send them, not now, but you could write what you want to say. Keep them. Maybe one day they can be delivered." Thomas's eyes lit up, a flicker of hope in their depths. "You think so?" Elara found him a small, worn notebook and a stub of a pencil. It was a simple gesture, but its impact was profound. From that day on, Thomas began to write. He wrote about the silence of the attic, the taste of Elara's meager meals, the constant drone of distant planes. He wrote about his memories of home, the scent of fresh-cut grass, the sound of his mother's laughter, the feel of his sweetheart's hand in his. He wrote to his family, assuring them he was safe, even when he wasn't. He wrote to his sweetheart, promising a future he wasn't sure he'd ever have. Each letter was a piece of his soul, a release of the immense pressure building within him. And Elara, listening to the soft scratching of his pencil from the floor below, felt a different kind of connection forming between them. The letters, unread by anyone but Thomas, became a silent testament to his resilience and a fragile bridge between his imprisoned reality and the world he yearned to rejoin. It was an act of hope in a hopeless time, a small defiance against the silence imposed by war. The rhythm of their hidden life settled into a precarious routine. Days were marked by the hushed exchanges of food and water, the subtle creak of the attic door, and the constant, silent vigil Elara maintained. Thomas continued to write, filling page after page with his hopes, fears, and memories. Elara, in turn, would often find him immersed in his writing. A quiet intensity on his face, and a sense of peace seemed to descend upon him in those moments. Their conversations deepened beyond mere necessities. They spoke of the war, its devastating impact, and their shared longing for peace. Thomas recounted stories of flying, the exhilaration of the open sky, a stark contrast to his present confinement. Elara shared tales of Amsterdam before the occupation, of vibrant markets and carefree strolls along the canals, painting a picture of a world Thomas had never known but could now imagine. They discovered shared loves for certain authors, for the beauty of nature and for the simple pleasures that seemed so distant now. A quiet, unspoken understanding grew between them. It wasn't love in the conventional sense, but something profound and enduring, a bond forged in shared fear, mutual respect, and an extraordinary act of kindness. Elara found solace in Thomas's presence, a companion in her lonely act of defiance. And Thomas, isolated from everyone he knew, found a lifeline in Elara's unwavering support and quiet strength. He started leaving small notes for her, sometimes just a thank you, other times a brief observation or a question, slipped under the attic door after she left. These tiny slips of paper, found amidst her daily chores, became precious treasures to Elara, tangible proof of their shared secret and the growing warmth between them. The world outside continued its brutal march. News of bombings, deportations, and increasing rationing reached them through clandestine radio broadcasts. Each day was a testament to their bravery, a gamble against discovery. The weight of the secret never truly lifted, but the shared burden, the quiet companionship, made it bearable. In the solitude of the attic, amidst the dust and shadows, a unique human connection blossomed, a beacon of hope in the suffocating darkness of war. It was a relationship built on trust and resilience, a testament to the power of human connection even in the most perilous of times. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button to follow Elara and Thomas's story to the very end. The winter of 1943 was harsh, the canals frozen solid and the streets slick with ice. The occupation's grip tightened further, food became scarcer, and the atmosphere in Amsterdam grew more oppressive. Elara's parents, though outwardly maintaining a calm demeanor, carried the heavy weight of their resistance activities. They knew nothing of Thomas directly, but their quiet acts of defiance, like distributing illegal newspapers or providing shelter for others in fleeting moments, mirrored Elara's own clandestine efforts. One evening, Jan, the resistance contact who had brought Thomas to Elara, visited under the guise of an ordinary social call. His eyes, however, held a new urgency. He spoke in hushed tones about increased German surveillance, about network members being captured, and about the growing risks. "The situation is deteriorating, Elara," he warned, his voice barely audible. "They're cracking down hard. Anyone harboring Allied personnel, the consequences are severe." Elara's heart seized. She feigned indifference, but her mind raced. How much longer could she keep Thomas hidden? The attic, once a sanctuary, now felt like a trap, its walls closing in. Thomas, though isolated, was perceptive. He noticed Elara's growing anxiety, the faint lines of worry etched around her eyes. When she brought him his meager meal that night, her hand trembled slightly. "Is everything all right?" he asked, his voice gentle. Elara hesitated, then decided to share a part of her burden. "The resistance. They're facing more pressure. It makes everything riskier." She didn't elaborate on the specifics, but Thomas understood the unspoken implication. Their hidden existence was becoming even more perilous. He looked at the stack of letters beside his makeshift bed, a silent testament to his prolonged stay. He knew he was a liability, a constant danger to Elara and her family. A sense of quiet desperation settled over the attic. Thomas, though grateful for her courage and kindness, felt a surge of guilt. His presence endangered the very person who had saved his life. The whispers of the resistance, carried on the cold night air, served as a stark reminder of the ever-present danger, pushing Elara to the brink of her endurance and forcing Thomas to confront the harsh reality of his situation. The fragile peace they had built was under threat, and the time for agonizing decisions was drawing near. The conversation with Jan had left Elara with a profound sense of unease. The risk of discovery was mounting, and she knew she couldn't put her family in further jeopardy indefinitely. The thought of Thomas being found, of the brutal consequences, sent shivers down her spine. Yet, the idea of turning him out, knowing the dangers he would face alone, was equally unbearable. That night, Elara couldn't sleep. She paced her small room, the creaking of the floorboards above her a constant reminder of her hidden guest. She considered every possibility, every desperate scenario. Finally, an idea, perilous but potentially life-saving, began to form. It involved leveraging her parents' resistance contacts, but in a way that minimized their direct involvement with Thomas. The next morning, she approached Thomas with a new resolve. "We need to make a plan," she stated, her voice firm. "You can't stay here indefinitely. It's too dangerous for all of us." Thomas nodded, his face grim. He had already come to the same conclusion. "What do you propose?" he asked, his voice heavy with resignation. Elara outlined her idea. "My parents have connections to a network that helps downed airmen escape to England, via France and then Spain. It's incredibly risky, and it takes time and resources, but it's your only real chance." She explained the meticulous planning involved, the fake papers, the secret routes, the constant threat of betrayal. Thomas listened intently, a flicker of hope warring with the stark reality of the dangers. "It won't be easy," Elara continued, "and you'll have to be stronger than you've ever been. But it's a path to freedom." He looked at the stack of letters beside him, a monument to his long captivity. "I understand," he said, his voice quiet but determined. "Whatever it takes." Over the next few weeks, Elara discreetly initiated contact with the outer circles of the escape network, using coded messages and intermediaries. Each step was fraught with tension, a delicate dance around German surveillance. Thomas, sensing the renewed purpose, began to focus on his physical recovery with an almost desperate intensity. He did exercises in the limited space, pushing himself to regain his strength, knowing that his life depended on it. The attic, once a place of passive waiting, was now a training ground for a perilous journey, a beacon of hope against the ever-present threat of discovery. The preparations for Thomas's escape were painstakingly slow, each step measured and fraught with tension. Weeks turned into months, and the spring of 1944 brought no immediate relief from the occupation. Elara used every resource at her disposal, relying on whispers from the resistance network. Coded messages passed through seemingly innocuous conversations, and the quiet bravery of strangers. The waiting was agonizing. For Thomas, it was a torment of hope deferred. He continued to write his letters, now imbued with a desperate urgency. He chronicled the endless days, the sounds of the city filtering into his attic sanctuary, the growing anxiety in Elara's eyes. Each letter was a silent prayer, a promise to himself and to those he desperately wished to return to. For Elara, the waiting was a constant battle against fear. Every knock at the door, every distant siren sent her heart racing. She meticulously ensured Thomas remained invisible, a phantom presence in her home. She learned to read the subtle shifts in the political landscape, the whispers of increasing Gestapo activity, and the growing sense of desperation among the Dutch population. Their conversations in the attic became more profound, a shared solace in the face of uncertainty. Thomas spoke of his family, his dreams for a future free from war, and the profound gratitude he felt for Elara. Elara, in turn, spoke of her hopes for a liberated Netherlands, for a return to normalcy, and for a world where people could live without fear. The bond between them had deepened into an unbreakable trust, forged in the crucible of their shared secret. Finally, a coded message arrived. It was brief, cryptic, but undeniable. The window of opportunity was opening. A small, carefully selected group of escorts would attempt to move Thomas south, through Belgium, towards the French border. The details were sparse, designed for maximum security, but the date was set. The realization brought a mix of relief and profound sadness. Their unique, perilous companionship was coming to an end. The thought of their separation, of the silence that would descend upon the attic, weighed heavily on Elara. But the overwhelming emotion was the desperate hope that Thomas would finally be free. Don't miss the dramatic conclusion. Subscribe now to witness the outcome of Elara and Thomas's incredible journey. The day of Thomas's departure arrived, cloaked in a thick, unseasonal fog, a fitting shroud for the clandestine operation. Elara felt a knot of dread and anticipation tighten in her stomach. She had prepared a small, inconspicuous bag for him, some extra rations, a worn map, and a few last clean bandages. His stack of letters, years of his hopes and fears, were carefully tucked inside his jacket. They stood in the attic, the silence amplifying the thumping of Elara's heart. The moment of farewell was heavy, with unspoken emotions. "Be careful, Thomas," Elara whispered, her voice thick. "Every step." Thomas nodded, his blue eyes intense. "I will. And Elara, I don't know how I can ever thank you. You saved my life. You gave me hope." He paused, his gaze sweeping around the dusty attic that had been his prison and his sanctuary. "I won't forget this. I won't forget you." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, crudely carved wooden bird. "It's all I have," he said, pressing it into her hand. "My grandfather carved it. For good luck." Elara's fingers closed around the smooth, warm wood. It was a tangible piece of him, a promise of memory. A soft, almost imperceptible knock echoed from downstairs, the signal. It was time. Jan was waiting. With one last, lingering look, Thomas turned and descended the stairs, his footsteps barely audible. Elara remained in the attic doorway, watching his shadow disappear. The silence that fell after he was gone was deafening, a vast, echoing emptiness that filled the space where his presence had been. She stood there for a long time, the wooden bird clutched in her hand, the weight of the secret now coupled with the aching void of his absence. The attic, once a vibrant hub of hushed conversations and quiet resilience, returned to being just an attic, cold, dusty, and empty. But the memories, the shared moments, and the profound bond they had forged remained, etched into the very fabric of the old house. The war continued its relentless march, but a part of Elara felt irrevocably changed, forever marked by the remarkable act of courage and kindness that had unfolded within her walls. The months that followed Thomas's departure were a blur of anxious waiting for Elara. The war raged on, but with each passing week, news of Allied advances grew more frequent. The spring of 1945 brought with it a fragile yet undeniable sense of hope. The sounds of distant battles became closer, then receded, replaced by the joyous shouts and ringing bells that heralded the liberation of the Netherlands. The celebrations were wild, cathartic. People danced in the streets, flags waved, and the oppressive shadow of occupation lifted, revealing a city reborn. Elara joined in the revelry, her heart soaring with relief and a profound sense of gratitude. The weight of years of fear and secrecy finally lifted from her shoulders. Yet amidst the jubilation, a quiet longing persisted. Had Thomas made it? Was he safe? The letters he had written remained in the attic, a silent testament to their shared history, their words unread by anyone but him. Life slowly began to normalize. Food became more plentiful, the curfews vanished, and the sounds of laughter replaced the whispers of fear. Elara started rebuilding her life, helping her parents with their post-war efforts and finding a renewed sense of purpose in the vibrant, recovering city. The wooden bird Thomas had given her remained a cherished possession, a small, tangible link to the extraordinary chapter of her life. Years passed, the scars of war remained, etched into the landscape and the memories of the people, but life moved forward. Elara often thought of Thomas, wondering about his fate, about the life he had returned to or built. She never spoke of him, the secret remaining hers alone, a precious, painful memory. The attic remained untouched, a silent sentinel to the hidden drama it had witnessed. It was a time of healing, of rebuilding, and of looking towards a future where the horrors of the past were slowly, painstakingly relegated to history. Yet a part of her heart held onto the quiet hope that one day, somehow, she would know if her courageous act had truly led him to freedom. It was the summer of 1948, 3 years after the war had ended, when a small, unassuming envelope arrived at Elara's doorstep. The handwriting was unfamiliar, yet strangely captivating. Her heart pounded as she tore it open. Inside, a letter, dated just a few weeks prior, and a familiar, slightly worn stack of pages. Thomas's letters. The first letter was from Thomas Sterling. He had made it. He had escaped, reached England, and rejoined his family. He wrote of his recovery, the joy of being reunited with his loved ones, and the long, arduous process of rebuilding his life. He explained that it had taken him years to feel truly ready, truly capable of reaching out, wanting to ensure he was fully healed, and also to find a way to send the most precious cargo, his letters. "Elara," he wrote, "I promised I wouldn't forget you. Not a day has passed since I left your attic that I haven't thought of your courage, your kindness. You saved me, not just my life, but my sanity. The letters, they were my lifeline. They kept me tethered to hope. And now I want you to read them, to know what you meant to me, what you still mean." Elara's hands trembled as she began to read the stack of letters, chronologically, page by page. She read of his pain, his boredom, his yearning for home. But more profoundly, she read of his growing admiration for her, his silent observations of her quiet strength, her unwavering spirit. He wrote about the small acts of kindness she performed, the way her presence brought light into the oppressive darkness of the attic. He wrote about the shared jokes, the serious discussions, and the unspoken understanding that had blossomed between them. Tears streamed down her face as she read. It was a profound validation, a beautiful unfolding of the silent promise they had made to each other. He hadn't just survived, he had remembered, he had honored her sacrifice. The last letter, dated just before his escape, was a heartfelt farewell, full of gratitude and the hope of one day reconnecting. Elara carefully placed all the letters back in the envelope, her heart overflowing with a bittersweet joy. She looked at the wooden bird on her mantelpiece, a symbol of a promise kept. The attic, once a place of fear and secrecy, was now a monument to an extraordinary human connection. The war had taken so much, but it had also, in its cruel way, forged an unbreakable bond, a testament to the enduring power of humanity, kindness, and unwavering hope. She knew then that some stories, even the ones hidden in plain sight, echo through a lifetime. Thank you for watching this incredible story. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more inspiring, true-to-life narratives.